Well, the House Committee on Families, Children, and Seniors will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Chair Young.
Present.
Representatives Copia.
Present.
Clanville.
Present.
Arbit. Edwards.
Here.
McDonald.
Present.
Wozniak.
Here.
Fox. Johnson.
Yes.
Thompson.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have 9 members present. You have a quorum.
Excellent. I need a motion to approve the minutes of our October 10th meeting. So moved by Representative Edwards. Thank you. And so today, this afternoon, we're going to be voting out House Bill 4547. That's the bill that increases the fees for marriage licenses. We all took testimony on that already, and we do know that for those who might not be able to afford the license, there is a waiver clause. So I know that was a concern for some people, so we don't have to worry about that. So with that, I need a motion to adopt the H1 substitute for House Bill 4547. So moved by Representative Glanville. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Young.
Yes. I'm here twice.
Representatives Copia.
Yes.
Glanville.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Pass.
Fox.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Thompson.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 3 nays, 1 pass. The substitute is adopted.
All right, excellent. So now I need a motion to report the bill with recommendation as an H1 substitute. So moved by Representative Arbit. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Young.
Yes.
Representatives Copia.
Yes.
Glanville.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Pass.
Fox.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Thompson.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 3 nays, 1 pass. House Bill 4547 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we will have a presentation today. We're excited about this presentation, an overview of the Attorney General's Elder Abuse Task Force. I know we have slides, a PowerPoint presentation. They're getting ready. We will hear from Ashley Steffen, the Attorney General's Legislative Director, and Scott Teeter, the AG's Financial Crimes Division Chief. He looks like he means business. All right. Watch out. Let's go. Well, thank you. Thank you both for joining us. We'll get the slide up. And when you're ready, feel free to begin.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Young. Yeah, we're getting this loaded up, but we're really excited to be here today. Like you said, my name is Ashley Steffen. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of the Attorney General. And with me, I have Scott Teeter. He is our Division Chief for the Financial Crimes Division. He is also the Chair of our Elder Abuse Task Force. And we are very excited just to brag a little bit about all the great work that the Department and the Task Force is doing to protect elder Michiganders from abuse, financial exploitation. And Scott, he is going to give a brief presentation.
Good afternoon. It is a privilege to be here. But actually, we have 2 members of the task force on this very committee, Rep. McDonald and Rep. Wozniak. We appreciate their work and their participation in the task force. It is the largest task force of its kind, not only now, but in the history of the state on this particular issue. And we started it in 2019, and we have over 110 people, over 55 organizations that all work together. It is bipartisan, it is nonpartisan, it is what can we do bringing all of the experts on this topic together and basically do a broad-based approach on how to not only improve the system, but then how to improve the different subsets of services that are provided to the elderly. It started in 2019 in March, and after that, my boss, along with at least 1 and then sometimes 2 sitting members of the Supreme Court, toured the state of Michigan. 12 stops, over 2,500 miles. We met with over 1,000 seniors. We also had we worked with sitting legislators to do 8 legislative town halls where we talked about and then also listened about the issue of elder abuse, financial exploitation, the guardian system throughout the state of Michigan. We went to all of these different counties, so Kent, Grand Traverse, Berrien, Macomb, Kalamazoo, Washtenaw, all of those. So we were everywhere and covered a lot of miles, listened to a lot of folks, and the basic premise was, tell us about your experience, both positive and negative, in the probate court system. And unfortunately, a lot of negative, not a lot of positive. And that actually reflected kind of what we already sort of knew. And that was when I first helped form the task force. I went back, and in 1998, the Supreme Court put together a task force on guardianships and conservatorships. And that actually is what gave rise to EPIC, the Emancipated Protected Individuals Code, which changed our probate court code. And they went, yeah, this isn't working. And now, 23 years later, we actually are addressing some of the things that they thought they fixed that they didn't fix. And that's really kind of what our first batch of legislation has been about. In addition to that, in 2007, the Governor Granholm at the time put together a task force on elder abuse and went, okay, well, what are the other issues? Not just guardians and conservators, but other systemic issues that we need to take a look at. And included protective services, law enforcement, legislative reforms, and there's a lot in there. And so in 2019, I actually made contact with some of the folks who sat on that task force, reviewed the report, and said, okay, are the problems that are identified in this report, are they still problems? And if they are, what's been done to implement, corrections or changes or improvements? The answer is they generated a report. Reports don't make changes. They make recommendations. And so when I sat down with the AG, I said, do you want to make another report or do you want to make changes? And so we were pretty upfront with everybody coming in. I said, this is not one of those really cool task forces where we all get together, do photo ops, and then we don't do anything. Because there are some of those out there. I said, if you're not the person who's going to do the work, would you send somebody from your office that is? Because this is a working task force. Every month we meet. In between that, every month there are committee meetings, and I'll talk about those in a minute. In between those, there are subcommittee meetings. There are no administrative figurehead positions on this task force. I chair every one of those meetings. The AG is at every monthly meeting. Oftentimes, members of the Supreme Court are at those meetings. The reps that Rep. McDonald and Wozniak are at those meetings. They show up, we get work done. So the committees that we put together, first one was training and education, because one of the problems that we ran into repeatedly, and one of the problems I ran into as a county prosecutor before I came to the AG's office, was we don't know how to handle financial exploitation cases. We just don't. It's a huge crime. Pre-COVID, the estimates were $50 billion with a B dollars were stolen from senior citizens across the United States. My guess is that number did not go down during COVID, particularly when the level of isolation of older adults went up. But we haven't found out about all of that yet. It's probably still rolling out. And reason being, and it is one of the techniques that you see for particularly family members who financially exploit their relatives is isolation. It's very similar to the dynamic we saw with domestic violence cases. You cut off the victim from all the support staff or your support system that they have, and then you can do whatever you want. And I think we're going to see more of that as society begins to open back up. So training law enforcement, training prosecutors, training judges, training guardians, training lawyers who work in this area, training healthcare workers, training financial institutions. And in each one of these, for example, law enforcement, one of the things we did was create a video series. And we put it on MyTrain. It's accessible by law enforcement only, and it teaches them literally step by step how to go through a financial exploitation case and put it together so that either myself, our area, or our division, or a county prosecutor could take it into court and try to remove the myth that these are civil cases just because they involve money. As some of you who are lawyers would echo, when we went to law school, because they said there wasn't going to be a lot of math, that was kind of the trade-off, or we'd have gone to business school and done something different. Same thing with cops. The idea was we went in to learn about guns and handcuffs, not about math. And I don't know what happened. Oh, here we go. Never mind, we're back. And so trying to teach them that just because it involves a lot of math doesn't make it a civil case and you can't close your folder and walk out. Ironically, if you walk into a Speedway station with a pistol and steal $100, the entire criminal justice system knows how to react. But if you move in with grandma and you steal $50,000, we all stand around and look at each other and go, do you think that's a civil case? I mean, because it's something we can prosecute? We got to stop that. In addition to the MyTrain videos, we also created a stop manual for both law enforcement and prosecutors, and it was my division that created it, and it is how we do these cases. So it was, here's what a search warrant looks like when you're going to get the suspect's bank records. Here's what they look like when you're going to get the victim's bank records. Here's how we schedule the accounts to identify who took the money and where it went. Here's who we would interview and how we would interview them. This is what a warrant looks like, and here's the charges. If you took that and knew nothing about these cases and literally paged through it, it would teach you how to put one of these together. And we put that in the hands of every single police officer in the state of Michigan through their associations. So the state police, the Michigan Sheriff's Association, the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, all sit on the task force, in addition with the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan. In addition to that, we've been working with the bar, not only the probate section, but also the elder law section to try to, I've done trainings with each of those groups multiple times to go, look, you're going to see this in your practice. And when you see it, you need to make contact with us, and this is how you could help us put it together for law enforcement. We have a video series out there now for home health care workers so that they, it's actually on the AG's website. And that video series teaches you what you can do and what you can't do. Like, for example, you shouldn't have yourself put on your client's bank account. You shouldn't become their power of attorney. You shouldn't write checks to yourself out of their account. Some of that's pretty basic, but we see it all the time. And so hopefully we can teach them, and even more importantly, what we're hoping is that as we continue to promote that if I'm looking for somebody to take care of my mom, the first thing I'm going to ask is, have you been through the video series with the AG's office? And if not, call me back when you do. Because the bottom line is, I want you to be qualified to take care of my mom. Not just how to take her temperature and administer her meds. I want you to understand the legal obligations and where the fences are so that you don't cross the line with my mom. Policy and legislation, this is probably, at least in this first couple years, the most active area because we have had a number of initiatives that required legislative changes. And again, a lot of those came out of the governor's task force, and then even before that, the Supreme Court's task force. Guardian certification. There's a bill that we have put together, and it will come to the floor hopefully soon. But our bottom line is that you should have at least as much state oversight to take over another human being's life and run it as you do to deal potatoes in the state of Michigan. It baffles me. You have to have a license and inspections to sell Christmas trees, but all you have to do is get a judge to appoint you, and you are now in charge of another human being's life. Every decision that they make is now your decision. And we don't even know who these people are. That's got to change. In addition to that, just some basic due process rights. If you took a criminal defendant and you treated them the way that we do folks who are accused of being not legally competent anymore, it would violate virtually every constitutional right they have. We've been very careful about that in this state. In fact, we created the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission solely to do a better job of appointing counsel for people who are indigent. We haven't done that for the elderly. They didn't commit a crime. They are not accused of committing crime. They got old and frail. And as a result of that, they have right now in the state of Michigan less rights than if they were accused of homicide. You can cut off their visitation. You can't do that with a criminal defendant. You don't have to provide them an attorney, even though they can't afford one for certain hearings. It's just some basic stuff where you go, how is that possible in the United States of America, and particularly in the state of Michigan? And that's got to change. In addition to that, you could be pulled out of your home if somebody has a guardianship over you and dropped into a nursing home without even a court hearing, let alone an attorney to represent you. That's got to change. It's just some of those things. I have, unfortunately been told stories of literally they went, they got an emergency guardian, the guardian was appointed, they got an order putting that person in a nursing home, cleaned out their house, threw all of their stuff in a dumpster, and put the house up for sale in a week. In America. We have to do better than that, and we can. And we've put together literally the best, most talented group of people I've ever worked with together to look at these issues and go, okay, how do we fix this? It's not going to fix everything, but I think we have a really good start. One of the complaints for guardians all the way across the state of Michigan, everywhere we went, was 44% of our caseload is not funded at all. The irony is, and you won't hear this much from the guardians, but in the state of Michigan, if I pull somebody out of their home and I drop them into a nursing home, Medicaid will pay me $83 a month to be their guardian. If I do twice as much work and I keep them in their home where they want to be, they'll pay them nothing. Now, I know human nature. That's my career, is I study it. Don't tell me that there isn't some incentive to make the decision that ironically is actually the most expensive for the state. And so what we want to do is take another look at that and go, okay, wait a minute, if we can, I'd pay you more money to keep them out of a facility because you're going to have to do more work, and that's where they want to stay in their own home anyway. What do we have to do to make that happen? So we're working on that. But a combination, and this is where we've struggled with the professional guardians, is I'm not paying you public money to take care of 600 people. That's wrong. You know why? Because you can't take care of 600 people. I don't care what anybody says. I grew up in a town with 900 people in it. If you told me the court was going to now put me in charge of every single person in my hometown for every decision that they make, I would tell you that's not possible. But it's happening. We have a number of guardians in the state of Michigan that range between 600 and 900. Well, that's got to change. If you're going to use public tax dollars to pay for care, then they deserve the best care that they can get. And we've looked at numbers all across the United States. From the low end, the American Bar Association says 20. If you're going to do this as a lawyer, 20, and you'll do a really good job. We've seen as high as 60. So we've tried to work with the professional guardians and come up with some reasonable limit in the middle. Their counter proposal was, well, we'll be limited to 36 that the state paid for, but no limit on all the rest of them. That means there's no limit at all. Because if I can take 800 clients and you paid the 36, we haven't limited anything. We haven't improved the quality of care for anybody. And that's the whole point. So creation of the Office of State Guardian. We have worked on this now for a couple years. It really is a combination of things. One is they would come up with the criteria for certification. And kind of like what you see with the Board of Realtors, with the Builders Board, with all of that, they would have oversight over professional guardians. And then if you had a complaint, because oftentimes the complaints come to my office because I don't know what's going on, but I think the guardian's doing something sketchy, so it comes to the Office of Attorney General, to the Finance Crimes Division. My jurisdiction is charging criminal charges. I'm a prosecutor. Well, I don't have the authority to remove a lousy guardian. That is the judge's role because they're the ones who appointed them. The Office of State Guardian could actually field those complaints, refer it to an investigation unit that we would create in the Attorney General's office to investigate both civil and criminal complaints and route it whichever direction it needs to go. Because then, if you're just a lousy guardian, then we would go in, first of all, we'd take a look to see maybe we need to pull your certification, just like we would pull your license if you're a lousy builder. It's consistent. If we give you a license to do what nobody else can do, then you're accountable for that. And if you do that badly, then we will stop your ability to do that. Now, maybe it's just this case and you do a great job with everybody else, you just don't like this ward or you don't like their family, and so you do a terrible job. Then we would actually go into court and initiate the petition with the judge to go, you need to take them off this case. But in our state right now, if you were doing a terrible job in Oakland County and the judge pulled you off of all of those cases, you could walk right into Wayne or Macomb and sign right back up. And that judge never know the difference. It's a statewide system. We need to create statewide oversight. So In addition to that, I think they're in front of the Senate right now, and that is one of the things we've talked about a lot from day one is not just correcting the problems in the Guardian system, but creating off-roads to getting into the Guardian system. I tell you, the absolute best interaction you can have with the Guardian system in the state of Michigan is not get in it. And we have to create off-roads because once you get on, it's a superhighway. There's no way off. And so we have looked at powers of attorney. If you give me the authority to make the decision on who's going to make the decisions for me, and I take that authority and I work with an elder law attorney like Rep. Wozniak or somebody else, and they write up all the paperwork, then why should the court ignore that and kick it to the curb and appoint a guardian instead? While I was legally competent, I made that call. And it may not be the person who petitions me in the court to be guardian, because maybe that's the kid who's a complete idiot and I don't like them. And I don't want them making those decisions. That's why I didn't pick them. That's my choice. The power of attorney gives that choice back to me, where it should be. And so hopefully we'll see that that come through soon, because again, the system is starting to collapse under its own weight. So the goal is we need to lighten the load. We need to create some ways to get out of it before you get in it, because once you get in it, there's not a good way off. Surrogate consent, I would presume, and we've talked about this in the Judiciary Committee, if you polled your constituents, most of them believe this is already the law in the state of Michigan, because that's what it is on TV. You need treatment. You can't give consent for treatment. We talk to your next of kin, your wife, your parent, your child, whatever. That's not the law in the state of Michigan. What's going to happen is they're not going to contact the family member, because the family member, unless they're a patient advocate designee or have a power of attorney, they don't have any authority to do anything. They're going to blow right by the family, go into probate court, get an emergency guardian, and that person's going to make the decision on whether or not my mom gets treatment. Really? 33 other states have already done this, and we're so far behind the curve. This is, and I don't know, I haven't heard any significant organized opposition to this bill. So I think we're ready when we get to there, but we're looking now, we need a sponsor, we're going to put it together. It's ready to go. We've drafted it. The hospitals like it because they're like, we don't care. You can pick, Bozo the clown, as long as there's somebody that's in a position we can go to and say, okay, do you want us to drill a hole in their head or not? And if you do, give us the word. But if you haven't done a patient advocate designation, they don't have any choice. They have to go to court, and we need to change that. PPOs for older or vulnerable adults, we have that all ready to go, and that is basically what happens when, and this is the scenario, usually it's an adult son in their 40s, dad has passed away, they move back in and they take over the household from their mom. It's a parasitic living relationship. They live off of mom's Social Security and they take control of the household. How do you get them out? This PPO creates a streamlined mechanism to go into court and go, I qualify as a vulnerable adult and I want them out of my house and I want them off of my bank account and I want them out of control over my life. We don't have that. This will do that. Criminal penalties for patterns of deceptive practices. It basically takes the consumer protection statute that we have, beefs it up where if you target people over 80 or 80 and up and you do that as a business practice, there's a criminal penalty for that. There's not right now. It's civil. Well, the only civil remedies are either by the older adult or in certain narrow circumstances, the AG's office. But that's not enough deterrent, because if it's your business model, you're making way more money than that's going to cost you. And we basically took the language out of the racketeering statute and said, you're committing consumer protection racketeering against people in 80 and up. And we need to make changes so that we deter that type of conduct. Because unfortunately, it's a fact. We have one of the preeminent national experts on our task force, Dr. Lichtenberg out of Wayne State University, and he said there is an actual organic decline in your ability to manage numbers that starts at a particular age. And when it doesn't mean you're not bright, it doesn't mean that you're not competent, it means that your ability to make financial decisions declines with age. That's a fact. Now, you may have started way higher than anybody else and you're still okay, But at one point, if you started maybe where everybody else was at, you'd drop below that. And I've had parasitic, predatory businesses that target those folks. And we need to stop that. We need to make it so that it's no longer open season if you're 80 and up. We need to add embezzlement from a vulnerable adult to the racketeering statute. This is just, it's a matter of timing. The racketeering statute came out before embezzlement from a vulnerable adult. I know that because I helped draft the embezzlement from a vulnerable adult statute. Testified in 2000 and then it became effective, but the racketeering statute was already on the books. We never went back and amended the racketeering statute to add that embezzlement charge. All the other embezzlements are already in there. It's just the one embezzlement from a vulnerable adult, it's not. Well, if you get together with 2 or more people and you target a vulnerable adult, there should be an increased penalty for that. There's not. One of the other areas is revised visitation. When we went around the state, this was a complaint we heard at virtually every single stop. My relative grabbed, it was brother or sister, whoever, grabbed my mom, stuck her in a nursing home, told the nursing home not to allow access, and they cut my contact with my mom off. That happens every day somewhere in the state of Michigan. It's not kidnapping. That's what people think. It's not. But what we have to do is create an outlet so that that happens. You can go into court and go, I want an order to see my mom. And if the person who's presently the guardian will not allow it, that's a basis to remove them as guardian because they're not appropriate. We've even talked with the nursing homes. I said, would it be easier for that to be settled in court and you have a court order than have it be fought out in your parking lot or your lobby? Because that's what happens now, is I'm going to see my mom. You're not on the list. Well, who didn't put me on the list? Your sister, who's the guardian. We've had professional guardians who have threatened to remove visitation to get people to stop complaining about the way they were providing services. That's so offensive, I don't even need to add to it. We got to stop it. We have a bill drawn up to do that. We have a guardianship diversion project that we're working on. We've applied for a grant, the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative, which is connected with U of M. We have 4 target sites picked out. If we get the grant, that will go into effect in January to educate people and to promote alternatives to guardianship, to try to start, creating ramps out of the system before you get into the system. We do have a committee that meets regularly with the courts and the state court administrator's office. We invited the probate judges from day one to sit on our task force and said, look, this is where you work. You don't own it. This is where you work. And, it's been a complicated relationship because frankly, some of the stuff we've suggested has been critical of some of the work they've done. And that's met with mixed results. I was in the meeting when my boss met with the Supreme Court and their executive leadership of the probate judges. We laid out a number of reforms that not only were made in the 1998 report, but also in the 2007 report, and said, hey, which of these do you think we can work on to move forward? And their president said, not one of them. I thought, well, that went well. But the bottom line was, then we're going to do it anyway, because we're not leaving it like it is. And we kept working. So law enforcement, we talked a little bit about this earlier. We did the video trainings. We did the stop manual. I also, along with the Prosecutor Association, designed the Vulnerable Adult Incident Report form. And it is a standardized investigation form that helps us document the conditions of the victim so that they would qualify under the Vulnerable Adult Embezzlement Statute. Most times, law enforcement's not asking the right questions. And when they don't ask the right questions, I don't get the right information. If I don't get the right information, neither me nor any other prosecutor can put it under the statute. And then it ends up getting pushed into that must be a civil case, and then nothing happens on it. And so we got together with the state police, with the Sheriff's Association, with the chiefs of police and the prosecutors, and this was adopted statewide as the best practices document. Adopting it statewide and getting it in the hands of every police officer has proven to be 2 different things. We're still working on that, but we'll keep working on it, because when I have this form, it sets up a whole different review under the statute. Because otherwise, the big the big question is, well, did you give consent for them to take the money? Or did they have your approval to take the money? Well, that puts us pre-embezzlement from a vulnerable adult statute like we did in the 90s. Well, if my victim had a stroke or has early onset dementia and can't say absolutely they didn't, that means it's okay. Well, we passed a law that said, no, that's not the case. What about unjust enrichment? If you took the money and you didn't do anything for it, that's a crime. Well, if you don't document they're a vulnerable adult, I can't use that statute. And if the police officer doesn't get it, then we're not going to have it. So, data collection and research, this is kind of an ongoing effort because one of the things we struggled with is Michigan does not have one court system or one court computer system where I can go on and go, tell me how many guardians there are in the state of Michigan and how many are represented by professionals and how many are represented by each company. That took months of digging through the judicial data warehouse. That should be a 30-second, search. We don't have that. So we've kind of been engaged in this ongoing effort. For 4 years, I asked MGA, could you just tell me how many people you represent? Still waiting. They tend to play with their cards close to the vest. It's like, well, we can't tell you that. Well, how can I go ask the legislature for public funding when I don't know how many people we're talking about? Well, just go ask for the money and we'll tell you later. Yeah, I can't really set my boss up to do that. You need to tell me how many people we're dealing with so we figure out what is the appropriate amount of money that we need to service that. So we did it, tried to do an end around and get it through the court system. But Wayne's not on the statewide system. Washtenaw not on the statewide. Berrien's not on the statewide system. Well, those are big counties. So it's been a struggle, but that's kind of an ongoing effort to go, how do we figure out if we make any progress if we don't know what the starting point is? Multidisciplinary teams, there is a statute that we are teeing up right now. We have been pushing these. We created a training manual. There's actually 2 different types of teams. Some counties can have both. It's really up to the counties. But the actual multidisciplinary team is kind of the out-facing part of the system, which is how do you make information available to the seniors in your county or in your district. And we have a team with law enforcement, with adult protective services, with the banks and credit unions, with Meals on Wheels, with Council on Aging to go, hey, you need to know if there's something going on in the county, or you need to know that what is a power of attorney and how do you get one? What's a patient advocate designee or a power of attorney for medical decisions? Try to get that stuff out there. In my own county, we started one in '97, and when the phony contractors moved into the county, it came to the task force by the sheriff. We put it in the paper and said, you need to be cautious. This is happening around here, not naming names, but if you get somebody who contacts you, call the sheriff's department and go, hey, do you know about, Bob's scam contractor? Are they good? And we can answer that. The more focused part of that is just law enforcement, prosecutor, and APS, and they would jointly staff cases. One of the things we've taught law enforcement from day one is these are more complicated than other cases because you may have a victim who's hesitant to report against a family member. Best description I would say it's mom guilt. Women survive men. If my kid is such a loser that they would steal my life savings, I must have been a terrible mom. That is such a horrible lie, but it's pretty prevalent. The second thing is I don't want them to go to jail. Well, problem is that you can only get rid of that much money with nothing to show for it. So your kid either has a gambling addiction or a drug addiction or some other issue because they didn't buy a lot of assets with what they took out of your account. It's all gone. And if I'm going to help them, I have to be able to stop them first. So that's more complicated. That's kind of where we get the domestic violence part, is your victim may be hesitant to help you. The second thing is that, so we roll out there, we get the warrant, we throw them in cuffs, we take them to jail. Who makes dinner tonight? Because they might be a lousy kid, but they're not going to starve themselves. They'll eat. Well, that's not a problem we normally have with law enforcement. When we take down a meth lab or we take down a drunk driver or you take down a bank robber, it doesn't really matter who's making supper. They're getting it at the county. Well, you got to broaden your focus because if we hurt the victim in the process of helping the victim, we haven't helped the victim. these multidisciplinary teams really help that kind of a more of a global approach, going, okay, if we're going to move through and do a warrant, it's always interesting when we do these trainings, because a lot of times we do them joint with APS and with law enforcement, and go, okay, let me ask, APS can't answer this, who would you pick up the phone and call if you needed somebody to come in and start doing home health care and prepare meals for the elder victim whose son you just took out? And I get that deer in the headlights look from law enforcement. And APS is like, we know this, let us answer. I said, they have literally at their disposal all of those agencies. So the cops who sit all together over here and the APS workers who sit all together over here, I said, you all need to meet and talk so that when that happens, we have a plan. That's what MDTs do. So we're going to tee up a piece of legislation, because the only way those work is if they're not subject to the Open Meetings Act and they're not subject to FOIA, so that we can have those conversations among just the investigative agencies and the prosecutor. So you'll see that one coming down the road. Just some real quick overview stuff. So we talk about competency, and that basically is, under Michigan's law, an individual who's impaired by reason of mental illness, mental deficiency, physical illness, chronic use of drugs, all of that, where to the extent that they lack sufficient understanding or capacity to make or communicate informed decisions. So when somebody hits that point, or we believe they're at that point, any interested person, so it could be APS, could be a relative, can file a petition into probate court and have them challenged on whether or not they are still legally competent to take care of themselves. A lot of times those happen because it's secondary to the fact that they're already not taking care of themselves. In addition to that, separate from this, so guardians take care of the person, where you live, how you're taken care of, what medical treatment you get, who gets to see you, all of that. Conservators, it's all the financial stuff. So you might be able to get up in the morning and take care of yourself, get dressed, take your meds, do all that. You've now lost the control of your bank account. You can't really manage your finances. Well, you don't need a guardian. Maybe you need a power of attorney for finances. Maybe you need a rep payee for your Social Security, or maybe you need a conservator. But you sure don't. I can make the rest of the decisions. I'm just not doing really well at the financial side. And the way that normally comes to head is you get shut off notices. You're not paying the bills. And so the first question is, well, is there somebody who's stealing money from you, which is often the case, or are you just are not in a position anymore to manage that part? So the Office of State Guardian I mentioned earlier, so it's registration and certification, and that will also include investigation and compliance, just like any other licensed profession. If we're going to give you authority like nobody else has in our society, then there's some accountability and some oversight that goes with that. In addition to that, the Indigent Guardian Program, I tell you, it's past due time where we come to the table and say there are insufficient resources on a state or on a county level to adequately protect people's constitutional rights. And we did that. That's exactly what MIDC is it was the recognition that court-appointed attorneys to represent criminal defendants on a county-by-county basis was not working, and those people's civil rights were being violated. Well, that is the system in probate court. And we have to make, take some steps to change that. The other thing is, our vision is that would be a clearinghouse for information, so that, for example, if I'm now, in the situation where my mom needs a guardian and I'm not a lawyer and I don't know how to be a guardian, I could contact the Office of State Guardian and go, can you tell me what materials are out there, what information is out there? I don't know how to fill out the forms. I don't even know what to do. How do I track the expenses so I don't get in trouble? All of that, we would have, it would be a one-stop shop. We've already talked about creating videos. It's not going to be the, Gone with the Wind in, 4 hours, or, what is the new Avatar? I think it's 3.5 hours. It's not going to be that. It's going to be 8 minutes, 10 minutes. It's going to go, here's the forms you got to fill out. Here's what you have to do. Here's the financial side that you have to track. Here's what you got to do. And I think if we do that, we'll have created the opportunity. You can go online in your house, pop it up on your computer, watch it, and learn. We mentioned surrogate consent. Bottom line is, this is the order that actually exists in most of the states across the country, and that is, first it's the spouse, unless there's divorce. You probably don't want your ex-spouse making a decision whether or not you're going to get medical treatment. Because their answer is no. It could happen. So it doesn't apply in that situation. Then it goes adult, child, parent, adult, sibling, right down the list. But it's all set. So that way there's no guesswork and we're not standing around having that argument in the lobby of the hospital when the law says none of you get a vote. We're going to the court to get an emergency guardian. The power of attorney, it creates a statutory power of attorney form. And we got into a big discussion with the elder law attorneys and with the probate attorneys because the argument was, well, we do a lot of these. And our kind of compromise was the people who have money and have the resources to do that, they're still going to come to you. But what about the people who don't? So we created a statutory form right in there. You pull it out, you fill in the blanks. It has several times warnings in there. There are legal obligations that go with this decision to become somebody else's attorney in fact. And if you have questions, you should talk to a lawyer because this is a contract and it's pretty important because it creates a fiduciary relationship. But the bottom line is, if I don't have the resources to go to a lawyer, I can download that form and it complies with all of Michigan law. Right now, people are going on the internet, they're downloading forms that do not comply with Michigan law. And they don't have those protections, and they don't have those warnings. This is going to make a difference. So hopefully the goal is, if I make those decisions, I don't end up in a guardianship or a conservatorship proceeding. So the vulnerable adult incident report form, we talked about that. It really does ask the question when law enforcement goes in, am I looking at abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation? And if I'm looking at any of those, the question is, okay, are they over 18? Do they need the assistance with the activities of daily living? Because that's the trigger for the vulnerable adult statute. Can they walk? Can they cook? Can they bathe? Can they, dry themselves? Can they get the doctor visits? Can they do banking? Can they do all of those things? And the more of those check boxes that I need assistance with, the more you're a vulnerable adult. Because Michigan, I probably should have started with this, we don't have an elder abuse statute. A lot of states do, where they just go, okay, over the age of 65, 70, 72, whatever number you want. Over that, you're going to get certain additional protection under the law. People have to treat you differently, and they can't take advantage of you. We don't have that. So it's vulnerable adult, which means basically, you could be a developmentally disabled person, fall under the statute. You could be, have some other physical disability or it could ultimately be because of age or some other issues. But ours is more broad-based, and although we've had discussions from time to time about should we put in a bright line and go, okay, over the age of fill in the blank, you're going to get special protection under the law. We got a lot of pushback from AARP, from others. The best definition we could agree on is an elder adult is 15 years older than whatever you are. And you can't put that in a statute, but it's kind of like, yeah, okay, that works. When I was 25, 40, yeah, that's old. It's changed a lot since, but bottom line is we don't have that. So if law enforcement doesn't document it here, I can't use that statute. So that's why we've been working on kind of bringing that up. The broad definition, though, of exploitation is any misuse of an elder person's funds. So if you put your name on your mom's account and you siphon all the money out when you didn't put the money in, that's a crime. It's not a civil matter. And this is where banking law is a little confusing as it relates to criminal law, and the reason being is because banks are, well, you both have access. Access and ownership are two different things. So picture the bank is like a big fancy coffee can. That's it. If I put all the money in the coffee can and you come along and take it out, that's stealing under Michigan law. It's not a new law. We had a case in 1999 that went to the Court of Appeals, and we put it into statute in 2000. And yet, this is an urban legend that will not die, is that law enforcement believes it, prosecutors believe it, that you can't charge embezzlement from a joint bank account. Like, most prosecutors who are practicing right now, I've been doing this 30 years, most of the prosecutors are prosecuting right now, that's never been the law in the state of Michigan. Their whole career, 23 years, it's not the law. Still believe it. I'm like, and so when they hear joint bank account, they close the file and go, yep, that's not us. Really? That's the whole purpose behind putting their name on the account, is to siphon the money out. That's why we passed a law. So don't do that. But if you don't enforce it, it's like the law doesn't exist. So part of that's been the training. Credit cards, especially now, it's so easy to go online and get a credit card in somebody else's name. Remember that the suspect in our cases, they already have all of their information. They got their social number, they got the date of birth, they have everything. They just go online, put it in, they intercept the mail. They don't even know that there is a credit card. That's why one of the things we suggest to law enforcement and to people who contact us thinking they may be victimized is run a credit report. You need to find out what's out there before we know who's doing it. And, I may have 3 or 4 credit cards you don't know anything about. Again, the accounts, we check for second mortgages, bank credit lines, unpaid property taxes, because that's a chunk of money that will come out of the account that nobody will question unless you routed it somewhere else instead of taking it, and paying it to the county treasurer. Again, we have a lot of forgery, ID theft, all of those. We talked a little bit about parasitic living arrangements. That's basically what I described earlier. It's, adult male in their 40s, moves into mom's basement, plays video games all day, and has a medical marijuana card. If that's one of your relatives, I apologize. But the bottom line is that's what I see the most. They're not there to help mom. Oftentimes it's grandkid. They haven't been around in a decade. But they have figured out grandma's 92 and can't live forever, so maybe I should move back in and help grandma. And next thing you know, their name's on the deed, their name's on the car. They got a new car because they purchased it on grandma's credit because their credit's lousy. One of the things I asked law enforcement to do, run every car in the driveway, particularly the 4-wheel drive with a lift kit or the Camaro, because chances are that maybe grandma wants to go to the doctor in style, but probably not. Then we start looking for, why does grandma who's bedridden, why'd she buy 2 brand new snowmobiles? No, maybe it's time to break out and see if we can go for it, but the answer is probably not. So those are all things that we take a look at and going, okay, what else is going on here? So we look at significant withdrawals from the elders account. One of the things that we started working with the banks, and I'll talk about FIPA here in a minute, is we needed the banks as a partners to go, you see some of this stuff. And the reason I knew it is because as a county prosecutor, when we'd have a case, I'd go back and tell her, like, yeah, I thought something was weird. Mrs. Smith comes in every day or every month. It's usually the 3rd or 4th because the Social Security hits, and then she comes in, pulls out $100, gets her hair done, tells me all kinds of stories, and we do this every month. And then this month, somebody else came with her I've never seen, and she pulled 10 grand in cash out. And I'm like, why didn't you call us? Well, I didn't know. Well, give me a chance, because once it goes out of the lobby, it never comes back. I mean, I can prosecute grandkid all day. The money's already gone. It's gone to the casino, it's gone to the drug dealer, it's gone somewhere, but it's not coming back. So when we got them to partner with us, the banks and credit unions, the number of reports of financial exploitation in the state of Michigan tripled from banks and credit unions because they were seeing it. They just weren't getting it to us. And again, one of the things we asked, not only the victim but also relatives, is there things missing from the mom's house? Coin collections, gun collections, the china cabinet's gone. All of there's just stuff that disappears because they sell it. Changes in wills, powers of attorney, car titles, changing the beneficiaries on insurance policies, all of that stuff. Again, getting themselves on the bank account. Are there unpaid bills or shut-off notices or all those things? One of the things we ask law enforcement to do when you go there, ask to review the checking account with the victim. First question is, when was the last time you saw your checkbook? And if the answer is months, that's a problem. Who's got it? My grandson. Well, how about if we take a look at it? And then the other thing I always ask them to do is, don't just look at the checks in the book. Where's the extra checks? Because they always buy them by like 2,000 at a time because that's the cheapest, and so you get to buy all of them. Where's that stack? Because oftentimes they'll pull them out of there, write them because they know if grandma looks at the register, it all looks good. I'll intercept the statement, never see it. Then we're writing checks 200 numbers ahead. So it's that kind of stuff where we have to go, okay, wait a minute, don't just blow in there, ask what happened and walk back out. There's more to these cases. The other thing is we ask, let's take a look at the bank records. Is there a pattern of online banking? There are some folks who do that that are part of our senior population. It's a very small percentage. Oftentimes I ran this account for 20 years and now my granddaughter moved in and now where there's a pattern of online banking, that's probably not grandma. The other thing is ATM withdrawals. If they're maxing the ATM withdrawals over and over and over and over and over, that's not grandma. And I ran the scenario by my mom. She started laughing. I said, you know, it's been my experience. They don't go to the ATM. This is the person who will write a check at Walmart for $17.67 after cashing in 3 coupons, and you're standing in line losing your mind behind them. But they're not maxing out the ATM, and they're not writing checks for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in cash. You see that pattern, somebody's stealing. You see checks to the caregiver, that's a problem. So those are kind of things where you go, okay, wait a minute, slow down. I know you got 50 complaints. Do this one really well. FEPA, that's what we talked about, the Financial Exploitation Prevention Act. It was effective September 26, 2021. It provided a way for financial institutions to report suspected exploitation. It also allowed them to freeze the account pending an investigation. And the Bankers Association, the Credit Union Association were great partners in helping us draft this. We've been working on this in the state of Michigan for over 25 years and could not get it through. And it took 2.5, 3 years before we got it through. But it really was with them at the table going, okay, there's some stuff we can do and there's some stuff we can't. I said, all right, well, help us understand. But you see this before anybody else. And if you tell us, then we can act before it continues to happen. One of the things they requested, which is actually very reasonable, they said, well, when we file the report, nobody ever tells us what happened. So 3 weeks later, when the grandkid comes back in to pull out another $5,000, am I supposed to give it to him or not? That's a really fair question. We're like, okay, all right, well, how about if we get a loop back to you, whether we're opening it for an investigation or not, and then you can decide whether or not to make the freeze. And so they said we report to APS. Will APS talk to us? Yes. If we report it to law enforcement, it creates that loop. And if you can't get APS or law enforcement to respond, you can file directly with the prosecutor and go, hey, we suspect financial exploitation. And we don't want to be a party to that. Would you help? So, how are we doing the time? So, bottom line is, it was important because they're the gatekeeper. If they let the money out of the lobby, it never comes back. And we told them that. I said, look, if you do it for no other reason than self-interest, do you think they're going to open an account and move grandma's $50,000 from their account, or from her account into yours? No. Now, unless you hold the account for the casino, you're not going to ever see that money again. So help us stop it, because in order to repay it doesn't do us very much good. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of where we've been working and where we're planning on going. It's an ongoing effort. Like I said, we meet every week. There are folks from literally every professional agency in the state that deal with the elderly, bless you, that we tried to draw on and going, we want to get this right. And some of the stuff takes longer than others, particularly the legislative stuff is more complicated. We've tried to work through that. But every time we've put together a bill and brought it, it's been 10 to 15 lawyers have already reviewed it. From our office, from the elder law attorneys, from the probate section, from the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative, from the prosecutors, to try to get everybody to go, okay, I'm coming at it from a prosecutor's angle because that's what I've done for 30 years. What am I not seeing? And help me make sure that I don't have blind spots. So we appreciate the partnership we've had with the legislature. It's been great so far. We got a lot of work left to do. Unfortunately, we're playing catch up with a lot of other states. I've been around this long enough where in 93, 94, we were behind everybody else on domestic violence. We were 15 years behind everybody else. And then we caught up. We got serious about it and went, okay, not here. No longer. You don't get to do that in the state of Michigan. And we did PPOs, we did domestic violence first offense, second offense, third offense. We did a lot. We did the standard investigation form that I helped draft that one and adopted it by statute. And we did make some significant changes that saved a lot of lives. It's time to do it again. There's work to do. We know what the problem is. And the question is, do we have the moral courage to do it? They aren't easy. If it was easy, it would have already been done. But there's a time and a place where we're here for a reason. This is the time, and this is the place, and this is the problem. We can fix this.
I like how you ended that. We can fix this. And you're absolutely a man about his business. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. No, I mean, you feel the passion. I mean, if you were just sitting there reading off a piece of paper, I'd be concerned. But that's not who you are, and that's not what you've done. And so to that, I say thank you. I got a whole, oh, look, people are clapping. You got a little, you brought your fan club with you?
Oh, I know.
So we try to get done about 15 after, so we still have a few minutes. I got a whole sheet of questions, but I'm not going to hog on the questions. But I do have a couple of things just are interesting to me. My first question is, who is the person who makes the first complaint, who raises the first red flag? Is there a particular person? Because when we're dealing with seniors who don't necessarily have family, you know, I'm just trying to figure that piece out.
Yeah, that's a good question. The complaints come from a lot of sources. There are mandatory reporters, just like there are in child abuse. So it could be a medical provider, could be a doctor, could be a nurse, could be law enforcement, could be an attorney. You know, that they're starting to do estate planning, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, they don't have the capacity to execute the documents that we're talking about. Any interested person under Michigan law can file those petitions. So sometimes it'll be, you know, if somebody has regular interaction with them going, okay, things are starting to come apart and there is no family around, then they're going to contact Adult Protective Services and we're going to, you know, open an investigation and go from there. So it can come from any one of those mandatory reporters, but Michigan has permissive reporting. So anybody can actually pick up the phone and go, hey.
That's what I wanted you to say.
My neighbor is struggling and I don't know how to help him, but somebody needs to take a look at this. And, you know, I see the scam contractors there and they've lost money there. And I see, you know, other folks that are, you know, pulling stuff out of something weird's going on. I'm not a cop, but could somebody come and take a look? You can always pick up the phone and call law enforcement to do a welfare check on anybody. But if you actually suspect abuse, neglect, or exploitation, then you call APS.
Excellent, excellent.
Great question, though.
Well, yeah, because I had a situation like that. It was a community member who unfortunately was diagnosed with terminal cancer, but had found a healer who was giving her all these herbs. Right, I know, and I'm going, oh my God, what do I do? And I couldn't find, she wouldn't give me any family information. And so the only thing I could do was to end up calling APS because I couldn't let her continue to just deteriorate. You know, I'm like, so the healer isn't
A
working.
few years ago, I took out a healing association, something or whatever they called themselves, over in Oakland County, over $300,000 in exploitation. So we sent them to prison. So bottom line is, but that started with somebody going, there's something wrong with this. Would you guys take a look?
Exactly. And that was the point I wanted to be certain that people, I always say, people are watching us. These get recorded. If you don't watch it live, you can always see it later, right? But the information is so important. And everybody needs to know that we play a role in making certain that our vulnerable adults and our seniors are being cared for and looked after. I'm going to ask one more question. I know we got at least another person, and then it'll come back to me. So when we talked about that video series, making certain people understand the legality around these roles that they now have in people's lives. My question was, are they mandated to watch these videos? How do they get access? You know, it's through I just want to have clarity on that. If
Are you talking about the law enforcement ones or the home health care workers?
Well, I've started with the home health care.
Home health care worker, it's totally voluntary. I would like to at least make it the preferred, like the best practices standard, where we encourage everybody. In fact, we're working on that with our public awareness committee of how do we get more PR out on that video series, so that, you know, as a consumer, I could go, okay, I want to look at that because I'd like to know what they're supposed to be doing when they're taking care of my mom, and then I would insist on any caretaker for my mom to watch that series, and so that's all voluntary. Law enforcement. We've put it all out there, and all the associations have assured us that, you know, their officers would watch them. And again, we tried to create those in like 8 to 10 minute blocks, so you could use them for the squad meeting, you know, at the beginning of the shift, Or if you're, sitting there waiting for some speeder to go by, you can watch the video and, pick up some stuff. And again, it would be available just like these all the time. And go, okay, wait a minute, I didn't have a case 3 months ago when I watched that, but now I got one. Let me go back and take a look at that.
Okay, very good. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very detail-oriented, well put together, well, to understand, very clear and concise. My question actually relates to, would this legislation protect an individual's last wishes? So, for example, if someone was in their right mind and they formulated their power of attorney, their last wishes, involving end-of-life care, code status, would anything in this legislation protect that if someone should take over guardianship and maybe change what their original wishes would have been? Because we do see that with family members.
Well, the push with the power of attorney statute is to honor that instead of doing a guardianship that overrides it. And so we're pushing judges to go, okay, wait a minute. If I've already made arrangements for my medical care, and I have a durable power of attorney for medical care, and for my legal affairs, there's no need for a guardian. And in fact, the legislation that we have that just passed the committee talks about that, going, okay, the judge at any time can stop a guardian proceeding and go, okay, we have a power of attorney. We don't need to do this. And that's the best way to honor it, is honor the contract that I already executed when I had the legal ability to do that. Because, and I've asked elder law attorneys this question. So do you feel a little disingenuous when you explain to somebody that if you pay me, I'm going to create all these documents so that your choices are the ones that control, and then have a probate judge toss them in the trash at the beginning of a guardian hearing and act like it never even happened? And the answer is, yeah, I do. Because I told those people, this is the mechanism under Michigan law to make sure that your wishes are honored. And we have to get courts to recognize under the law, that's a legally binding document, not only just on the parties, but on everybody else. And one of the issues that we kept running into is I get contacts from folks who said, I went to the bank, and the bank said, I'm not honoring a power of attorney, you gotta have a conservator. That shouldn't be the law. And now, if we get these bills passed, it won't be, because what it says is if I present it to you and you deny it, and if there's additional documentation, I provide verification, I'm the person named in the power of attorney and all that, and you still deny it, you get to pay my attorney fees when we go to court and I get it enforced.
So I asked the question because one of the things I witnessed as a nurse in a healthcare setting in long-term care was patients would have, a DNR status or would not want a tube feed should they be in a place where they couldn't swallow. Then family members come from out of town that you've never seen before. They get guardianship, and then their code status changes, and they're getting a PEG tube put in when it was not their wish to have it done. And they're, very knocking on death's door, and they're suffering, but they want that paycheck from their Social Security,
'cause
so
it
they're
keeps the
pushing
Social
to
Security
keep them
coming.
alive.
Yep.
So that was my question, if that was anything with code status would be put into this
Yeah,
legislation.
the increasing the acceptance of power of attorneys should stop that guardian petition.
Okay.
The judge should look and see there is no need for the court to step in and point somebody because you already have somebody.
Very good, thank you very much.
Good question.
Thank you for that, Representative. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Couple questions. First of all, I had a couple people contact me and tell me that when they have had fraud, these are older people, or they've been taken advantage of, their credit cards have been misused by whoever. They don't know these people. They've contacted financial institutions. They've contacted like a Kohl's department store, for example. It wasn't Kohl's, but
Right.
something like that. And they've notified them. And in most cases, it's all handled appropriately. But they've also been told, there is no law. We do not have to stop this monthly debit out of your credit card account. You can close down the credit card, but we're not going to. There's no law that makes them stop it. And I wonder if this needs to be added, because if it's shown that it's fraud, I never approved of this charge. Shouldn't they have to stop the recurring charges?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's actually, I can think of, just off the top of my head, 2 criminal statutes that apply to that. So they're not correct. The law in Michigan protects people whose identity has been stolen. And under the ID theft, you report it to MSP and also IC3, and you file an affidavit that will actually block those charges from hitting your credit report. So there are mechanisms under the ID theft statute that should stop that, because it would be a form of ID theft. Because obviously you're representing, I'm, Bob Smith, and this is my, I'm using this card lawfully. Well, that's not true. You're not Bob Smith. The other thing is it's unlawful use of a financial transaction device, and that's a 5-year felony in Michigan. And so in either of those scenarios, you're the victim of a crime, and as the victim of a crime, you're not responsible for those. And again, but you got to file the report with MSP, you file with IC3 that tracks not only interstate, but intrastate.
So they didn't report to all 3.
Right.
Is the problem.
Yep.
And we all know what I'm going to say next. Most people are never going to figure that out.
No, that's true. We get those calls regularly of going, I don't know what to do. This is what's happened, what do I do? And again, we refer them, it's like, okay, you can, go to MSP, go to IC3. I think, again, this whole area, because the bad guys have been out a couple steps ahead of us on pretty much all of this, the new one is crypto. Used to be I just had to worry about checks and cash and whatever. Now they're advising senior citizens to pull out their money, go down to a Bitcoin kiosk in some gas station, put their money in there, and in 15 seconds, it's halfway around the world. That's a game changer for us because the ability to move that money that quickly at a non-traceable form is a criminal's dream. So there, it's again, we're still playing catch up of trying to educate the public about, okay, well, here's the jury scam, the grandparent scam, the IRS scam, it's, what's the scam of the week? And we keep putting stuff out, law enforcement keeps putting stuff, you can't over-educate. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow for the retired auto workers. I'm in Detroit on Friday with the Department of Health and Human Services, all in an effort to I'd rather deal with telling you beforehand than have you call me after.
Are the 5-year felonies are there enough of those to make an example of it too?
That's difficult because those are probably going to go to a county prosecutor just because of the resource issue and because of the shortage of not only police officers but prosecutors in the state of Michigan right now. 5-year felonies are not getting a lot of attention. We're down almost 6,000 police officers. The last prosecutor's newsletter, 42 counties are looking for assistant prosecutors, 4 divisions of the AG's office, and both the U.S. Attorney's offices. Wow. Because young people who come out with a law degree where they owe $200,000 are not going into public service. That's just
That's for an entirely different conversation. Right?
Yeah.
It's across the board. Representative Fox, we run out of time too, Rep. Fox, so can you hold it to one question so we can get your Minority Vice Chair's question in before we wrap up?
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam, and thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question, and I think I might have seen you presenting before, and it seems like there are statistics out there in relation to how many of these crimes are done by relatives as opposed to others? What is just a general statistic there, just to remind me?
That's a really good question because what it doesn't factor in is underreporting. Because in the estimates I've seen on underreporting range anywhere from 1 in 3 to 1 in 20. So it kind of depends. I don't know how much we don't know about because if I knew my grandkid was stealing, I'd drop a line on him in a heartbeat, but it's just but there's a real hesitancy to report on family members. So we don't know what didn't get called in, and that's why you always hear that stat of 1 in 70 or 73,000, and now it's over 100,000. Well, all that is taking the 53,000 reports to Adult Protective Services and figuring a 50% non-reporting factor, and that number's low. Mm-hmm. Now, I can tell you, I used to get all the time, well, it doesn't happen with professional guardians. Well, in the last month and a half, I took 2 out of the 3 big cases we did were both professional guardians. One of them had a caseload of 150 people, and I got her bound over on 18 felony counts. So no, that's not true. One we convicted of 11 charges on 11 of her developmentally disabled wards because she used their checking account as her own. The only way he caught that one is somebody saw her driving around in one of their vehicles. He went, well, that's kind of weird. It's not her car. So trying to split that of what percentage should be reported, family members would be the lion's share. I think the last time I saw actual hard stats, it was about 68% was family members, and then contractors, online, internet, everybody else.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Thank you. Representative Wozniak?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me do this. A.G. Teeter, just a supposed case where Sonny gets appointed and he thinks he's doing a good thing taking care of Mom by hiring people under the table and paying them cash, no taxes. How do you, as a law enforcement person, then come in and disrupt that whole situation, or do you let it sit, or what's your best approach?
Well, I don't want to tell people that's a good idea, because it's not. It is against the law. I'm always concerned when we do that, particularly people who hire non-licensed individuals to do licensed functions. There is a legit reason for licensing in the state of Michigan. We kind of figured out that there should be a code of ethics, there should be training, there should be continuing education, there should be all of those things. My son's a licensed plumber, and he goes, you want to compare my work to Bob down the street? They're not the same. But the problem is when you hire Bob down the street, you can't be real unhappy with the results you got. If you hire licensed professionals to do the work, then you have an enforcement mechanism where they don't do it very well. We have an entire group in our criminal division that goes after unlicensed builders because of that, because they undermine the legitimate building industry and they put people at risk. So the answer is don't. Now, am I going to go after them? I'd rather them do a better job of taking care of Mom and worry about me less and worry about Mom more. And that would be the best way to do that, is to, step back and go, okay, I know it may have saved a few bucks, but I don't know that Bob knows what he's doing. So I think you're still better off to pick the professionals.
Thank you.
I think we could continue this conversation, but we have run out of time. I'd like to go ahead and enter a couple of cards in for the record. We have Cynthia Mifsud. Right, she wanted to have an opportunity to speak, but we've run out of time. And we additionally have, and she is here just to comment on the presentation of the Elder Abuse Task Force. So no legislation to oppose or support, just here, sounded like in support of you guys when they started clapping for you. But and then we also have Jody White. Jody wanted to also give a few words, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. We got to get to session. But thank you all so much for the presentation on today. Members know to follow up with you all afterward with additional questions. I know I have some things that I still want to talk about, so we'll be looking forward to working with you all in the very near future. And so, yes. And so with that, there being no further business before the Committee on Families, Children, and Seniors will now stand at ease, or now be adjourned. Yes. Yeah, we don't want to come right back.